Welcome to the Wayne Bennett podcast, celebrating West Virginia's people, places, and the culture of Southern Appalachia. Now here's your host, Wayne Bennett.
Welcome to Wayne Bennett's podcast. My name is Wayne Bennett, and I want to make a little addition to our last program, Uptown Memories of Beckley. One person I definitely think we ought to mention was Frank Albanese. They used to own a little fruit store and lunch counter there on Heber Street. We used to, as boys, we used to go up there. Every time we went to town, we'd go by to see him. When we bought anything at the store, it didn't matter. But sometimes he would be standing outside, and he'd pat us on the back or shake our hands. And this guy was a remarkable person. He was born in the province of Bari, Italy, and in the late 1800s, and came to the United States. His dad borrowed $65 and gave it to him. He got on a ship coming to America in around 1912. And he actually, as he was crossing the ocean, he stayed in the room of the steerage of the ship. It was just a cot there. And so when he got to the United States, he had $65 in his pocket. He could not speak any English, and for some way he got on a train from New York to Bluefield, and in Bluefield he met a distant relative. He stayed in Virginia for a while, got to work in the coal mines, sending money back home to help his family, plus he had a wife that was still in Italy, and he was trying to get her enough money to where she could come over there. He was working in Jenkins Jones mines down in McDowell County when a real estate agent from the Beckley area was down there looking at some property, and Frank had already saved some money too, and he bought some property from the real estate agent. The real estate agent was from Lilly Land Company. And he bought some property in Beckley from this guy. By this time, he had brought his wife over from Italy, and they moved to Beckley, and they had some land, which is now in the area of Clyde Street in Beckley. He ended up purchasing a couple horses and a wagon, and for several years, how he made a living was hauling stone. A lot of the Italian immigrants that came over were stonemasons, and very talented stonemasons, and they built a lot of the buildings around the area where stone was required. And so he started making a living hauling this stone on horse-drawn wagons. And some of the buildings around the Beckley area that he actually hauled stone to was the building, which is now housed by WVU Tech, but it was Beckley Junior High. At one time, it was actually Beckley High School at one time, and the old Raleigh General Hospital. If you see the stonework there, which is now City National Bank. But those are two of the buildings that he helped furnish supplies to. And during this time too, he was learning to speak the language. He saved enough money that he opened this fruit shop and lunch counter on Heber Street. It's now the Federal Building is where this place was. There was Tim's Hat Shop, and there was Albanese store, and Ben's Army store was around there somewhere, right in that particular area. But Frank loved the Beckley area, and he loved the United States of America. And so he was remembered as every national holiday. He had a flagpole in front of his store, and he would fly the United States flag. If it was a national holiday, you would see that flag flying. And also, he had developed this love for fireworks. Even back when he was in Italy as a kid, he had learned to set off fireworks and had actually become pretty good at it. And you didn't see a lot of that too many places. During the time he was living in Beckley, early on, sometimes he would put on individual shows for family and things like that. and purchased fireworks, and there were a lot of Italians involved in fireworks in the United States at that time. So he, at World War II, he and his wife had 3 sons and a daughter, and one of the sons I knew was John Albanese, and then there was Angelo Albanese. And if anybody remembers Angelo, Angelo used to drive a school bus. And a couple of years there, I rode the school bus that he drove, and he was a character. Kids loved him. I mean, he was always laughing and easy to get along with. But if you acted up, if you didn't know how to act on a bus, Angelo would stop the bus and put you off. It didn't matter where he was at. And of course, today of lawsuits and litigation, that wouldn't be too popular. But he drove a bus, and I think retired from the school system. But Angelo was one of his sons that I do remember. But Frank was also pretty popular and active in the Sons of Italy back during that time. And I don't know whether there's a Sons of Italy club or organization now or not, whether that's still going on or not. But it was a pretty active group at one time. After World War II, Frank had, like I said, been doing some individual shows, but and he had one son that was in the World War II, but he had started putting on fireworks shows to celebrate patriotism in the United States and the victory in Japan. VJ Day was actually started out in August after World War II, and then they started celebrating it in September, right around what we call Labor Day now, because when the formal agreement that Japan was getting out of the war, that was signed around September the 2nd or something like that. So he kind of combined Labor Day and VJ Day celebrations. That's when he would have a fireworks show. And he would take up money from people, put a lot of his own money into it, and he personally set the fireworks off. And so they saved a lot of money like that just with him. I don't think back then you had to have a pyrotechnic degree or any kind of a license. I'm not sure. Some of the shows, the early shows that he put on, was at New River Park, what is now New River Park. And they thought since they had the parking area, the city of Beckley had that, and it was a big area, and they made it a festival out of it there for a while. They had would have bands playing, politicians would come in, and they would set the fireworks up in the evening, and people would sit around the big bank around and watch the fireworks go off. And it was a pretty good place. Not a whole lot of parking area, but not a bad place. But it kind of outgrew the area. Then they had there were some issues. They had some issues at New River Park. One particular year, they had some boys that was up on the hill, and they were throwing rocks down at some of the people in the area, and actually threw rocks at some of the fireworks display, and caused a lot of damage. Even Frank himself got hit by a couple of rocks, and I think they did catch the boys. The next year they had quite a bit more security, but they kind of realized that maybe that wasn't the best place in the world to have the show. It moved out to the Pinecrest area. It moved out to Hill's department store, wanted to help with the fireworks, and they had some parking, of course, now where Staples and Aldi's and Planet Fitness is. And then people would park along Raglan Road and to watch the fireworks right around the Hills department store. Frank Albanese was in charge of that. Then that kind of outgrew that area, and then Hills kind of quit sponsoring it. And so it went back to around the Armory in the Pinecrest area. Seemed to be the best place to have it, and that's where they they have it now. And but Frank was not only did he help with taking the money up. Every year, people knew that it was. If you walked around town in Beckley, Frank would see you around that time a month before. He would be taking up some money, and there was always people contributing to the cause. But he also had some shows during July the 4th in Mullins. He put off fireworks in Mullins. He had one time in New Year's Eve, or a couple times, I think, up off Harper Road where the water towers are above Milton Mortuary now. He put off a fireworks show on New Year's Eve in the wintertime. And so something that he really was good at and actually enjoyed doing it. But it took a lot of money. It took a lot of effort to raise that money. Even in 1965, too, the American Legion Post 32 honored Frank because he had been doing this for 20 years already. And they made him an honorary member of Post 32, and he was the only person at that time who was a member of the post that was a non-veteran. We have one other show I can remember that at the Beckley Open Air Theater. Frank had put on a show there on July the 4th, so he was very busy. Another negative incident that they had, and this was back in the 50s, he had storage at the airport. That's where he stored some of his fireworks. He was getting ready for a show, and somebody broke into the storage building and stole a lot of his major fireworks, and which was very costly at the time. And so it wasn't without some negativity and made the task of putting on the show pretty difficult. But Frank had, as he got older, it got a little tougher to take up the money, and they didn't have social media back then, and so he put announcements in the paper. People could send him money, or people he would just run into in the city of Beckley. Of course, Albanese store was kind of a hangout place for a lot of people, and so he was able to meet a lot of people and collect donations. Every year, again, it got a little tougher and tougher. In 1973, Frank was around 85 years old at that time. Robert C. Byrd, who was a senator and had always made a donation. Every year, Robert C. Byrd had sent a donation to Frank for the fireworks in Beckley. And he came in the town with his wife, and he gave Frank Albanese a plaque, and it was the type of plaque that he had presented. Frank was the third person who had ever received that, and basically honoring his patriotism and his loyalty to the country. And even then, with the tough job of raising money and some of the negative things that had happened during or before the fireworks shows, Frank constantly said how good the country had been good to him, and how the people from Beckley had been good to him, and how much he loved the area, and he never considered ever going back to Italy and living. So, but sadly, in 1973, after he was honored, the city of Beckley had confiscated the land and building of Tim's Hat Shop, or I think it had become Tom's Hat Shop at that time, and Frank Albanese store. They were going to put in additional parking areas because of the number of people that was coming downtown, and so they were going to have to take those particular facilities. So I think it was by the end of that year, around that particular time, that Frank Albanese store was closed down. He died in 1979, but what a story. And the guy would be a true example of what we sometimes take for granted. And so, yeah, when this coming Labor Day, I'm sure there'll be some type of fireworks display. Usually the city of Beckley, I think now, does help sponsor or may sponsor all of it. I'm not sure. But just take a moment and think of this young Italian guy who comes over with $65 in his pocket and ends up being the epitome of what patriotism and loyalty is all about. And that's my story about Frank Albanese. Now, if you have a story and you'd like to be on our show, we would love to have you. You can contact me at awbennett50@gmail.com. We'd love to have you. And remember, if you're not dead yet, you're not done yet. Till next time, God bless you.